Is it just me, or is it like the mainstream media is always the last of the party, then they state the obvious and expect a pat on the back for telling us something we've always known and they gaslit us about?
You may remember former ABC reporter Terry Moran. He was the one fired by the network shortly after making a social media post where he said, among other things, that senior Trump advisor Stephen Miller was, quote, richly endowed with the capacity for hatred. Well, he's now admitting the networks are, in fact, biased. Moran wrote on Substack, quote, I worked at ABC News for almost 28 years. I'm proud to say that. A lot of good people do a lot of really good work there, and they try hard to get the story right. But were we biased? Yes, almost inadvertently, I'd say. Moran writes, saying that the bias from mainstream media is not malevolent in nature, stems instead from a lack of viewpoint diversity.
Viewpoint diversity. So we've been saying this since I think the first time Trump said fake media and fake news. I think these things were always there. The biases were always there, but we just didn't notice it. And once it was brought to our attention, we started to see it more and more. So for him to come out now and state something that we've always known, they said didn't exist, why should we be giving him any credit for saying something that is just so blatantly obvious? And then he talks about the whole diversity thing, and they will break this down a little bit further in the video. But the idea of diversity is not just about people looking different or sleeping with different kinds of people. It's about thought. We need diversity of thought, not just people who look different.
Quote, there are hardly any people who supported Donald Trump at ABC News or the other networks. This is bound to impact coverage, not so much out of malevolent bias, the cartoon version peddled by Trump, more out of a kind of what is a kind of deafness. He continues, yes, news teams go out with a microphone and a camera and accost people at Trump rallies, but to me that often comes off as weirdly anthropological and inaccurate, kind of like trying to understand nature by visiting a zoo.
That's actually a good analogy. And again, we've been saying this. You can't just show up at a Trump rally and put a microphone in front of people's faces and always edit out just the regular everyday people. The only people that they'll really put in the cut that goes to air is the extremes, because that's what they want to make it look like. And if you continually vilify a group of people and only show the extremes on either side, then people on the side that opposes them will always have that view of them. But if they were to go out and just talk to normal, regular, everyday Trump supporters, they would see that, they're just like everyone else. Just like if they went out and talked to normal, everyday Democrats, you'd see that they're not extremes. It's like that thing about the horseshoe. So the far left and the far right are closer together than the people that are closer in the middle. So we all want the same things, but the far left and the far right tend to mess things up. And now he's talking about the fact that, well, it wasn't intentional. They're not intentionally biased. They just have a deafness because most of them don't vote for Trump. Like, we knew this. It's obvious. And it is malevolent in the sense that they know that this is the case. And we see it. And when it's called out, they say you're lying, or they say that you're gaslighting. They say all these things about Trump voters or just regular smart people that said, I'm watching this news story and it's clearly biased in one direction.
This indictment of network media came in the middle of an article by Moran slamming the FCC's approval of the Paramount Skydance merger, or more specifically, the demand from the FCC that CBS, owned by
I gotta say this. Am I the only one that anytime I hear the thing FCC, I just think of Eminem? The FCC won't let me be me. Anytime I hear FCC, I always hear that.
Paramount would need to appoint a bias monitor for their coverage. Or, as Moran put it, the Trump FCC demanded an in-house stooge at the news division to alert the corporate bosses when the journalists get out of line and exhibit bias. The federal government has no business dictating the editorial content of news coverage, Moran continued. This isn't Viktor Orban's Hungary, or the Law and Justice Party's Poland, or Putin's Russia in the late 1990s, when free voices critical of the Kremlin could still be heard before he crushed them.
Now, he's saying that now only because he's been fired. I can bet my bottom dollar that had he not been fired and someone had done this type of reporting or said the exact same things that he's saying now, he would say it's not true. He would say that the organization that he works for has no bias and there's a bunch of free thinkers and they try and they actually deliver on being straight down the middle. And we all know it's not true. It's true on both sides. I think, and I correct me if I'm wrong, definitely put this in the comments. I think when you watch Fox, you go into Fox knowing that they have a conservative slant. Most of the shows that I watch The Five, I watch Gutfeld, they do tend to have someone that is from the other side on there. And like you have Jessica, Jessica is Jessica. She's got TDS crazy, but they have civil conversations. When you look at, MSNBC, CNN, they have Scott Jennings. Yep, Scott Jennings, he holds it down for the conservatives. But other than that, you don't really see true conservatives. You do have these fake conservatives, but you don't see true conservatives. It's very unbalanced. When you look at the guests that they have on The View, they never have conservatives, like true conservatives. And if they do, they all gang up against them. So, this guy coming out now, telling us what we already know, telling us what we've been saying, day late, dollar short.
He goes on, yes, from my perspective, the old news networks are biased, but Brendan Carr can go to hell. Brendan Carr, we should say, the head of the FCC and the person who's trying to impose these conditions on CBS and Paramount, like the bias monitor, which is a concept that I think Mr. Stalin or Mr. Lenin would be happy with.
Bias monitor is not a phrase I like very much. It's not one I've appreciated when it's been on college campuses, for instance, when they're looking out for incidents of bias, going back to the radar I discussed. Yeah, look, they should be free to be biased, obviously. Trying to weigh and calculate and measure and police bias of this sort in coverage is also a little bit weird because, then we're just getting to a version of net neutrality where if they have...
I agree, but I disagree all at the same time. I think, these are private entities. They should be able to do whatever it is they want to do because they're private entities. But I think they should actually be more honest, so don't make it look like you're not being biased. If you're being biased, just say, this is my opinion, this is my view. As we already know, most of the people that work for these channels, they all vote Democrat. Not a problem with that. But they present and they will say things and frame things as if, they're independent and their actual political leaning has nothing to do with how they report the news. And it's very obvious that that's not true. So whilst I don't think that the government should have some type of body that, monitors and controls private companies, I'm not for that. I think maybe there needs to be some type of entity that can at least call these things out, because then they can police themselves, but they won't be in a position at that point where they at least try to project as if they are straight down the middle. I think maybe, I don't know what I'm saying. I don't know. But what I am saying is that I don't think that the government should police them, but I also think that there should be something in place that they just have to be open about their political slant, because it's really obvious and they'll keep saying that they're not leaning towards one side. I think it would be good just to be straight up. I think, like I said, when you watch Fox, you just know 9 times out of 10 they're going to support whatever Trump says.
This much pro-Republican, they got to have this much anti-Republican. I would find that ridiculous if applied to Fox News or Newsmax or any other thing. And it's cable versus, so I know the licenses work differently and that's all, but to me these are becoming archaic distinctions in an era where the internet and streaming exists. Private companies should broadly be allowed to set whatever editorial policies they want. It's not the business of the federal government. And all the times I complained when the Democratic administrations were doing sort of monetary things or jawboning to social media companies, I was against. This is just like that. I think they should just let the merger happen and not.
this is one of the things I do like about Robbie. Robbie's not like a hardcore conservative, and he will, say the things that are similar to what I would say. It's a nuanced position, and I found him to be consistent in his view on things. So he'll call out either side when he sees just something that's blatantly wrong or just something that's blatantly obvious. So his view is kind of like my view, but I think he articulated it way better than I did.
Not try to police
Yeah.
the aspects of the editorial content.
No,
What else can I say?
and the policing of the editorial content is, I think, quite obviously and flagrantly an attempt by the Trump administration to ensure friendlier coverage of them. To Terry Moran.
Niall is wrong there. Niall is wrong. Niall is wrong. And Niall. So he said that it's obviously to, try to get more positive coverage of Trump. Like when you look at the statistics leading up to the last election, it was like 98% negative news about Trump. And then on the other side, it was like 95% positive information about Kamala Harris. So just making sure that it's balanced. Yes, it would be good for the Trump team, but it's just like when it's just so blatantly and it's just so overwhelmingly on one side, something does need to be done. At very least, people should just come out and say, we are the TDS, we don't like Trump network. Just say it. We watch it, we know that. But now makes it look like there's something nefarious in just wanting the news to be the news like it used to be. Like a lot of the older journalists and newscasters, I'm sure they had a view. Obviously, they had a view, but you wouldn't know it from the way that they reported the news, or at least it wasn't as obvious. And then we didn't have the internet and all of that, so they weren't tweeting things that just gave away the game about what their view is. And now people just blatantly just disrespect the office of the president. They'll say that they're only doing it because Trump has brought the office of the president down, but that's not what it is. This is how they feel anyway, and they just use that as an excuse. So their guy's not in. Remember, they called Reagan a racist. They call Bush every Republican they call a racist. Everything that they're leveling against Donald Trump are the same things that they've leveled against every Republican president. We just now have alternative media where we can see and hear more. And this is why the mainstream media should just be honest, because most people aren't watching them anyway, so they might as well go with a formula that is going to help get some eyeballs there, rather than people watching Joe Rogan and the other people online. And hopefully people start watching me. But there's just so many other options that you have that you don't really need the mainstream media the way that you did before.
And other point about diversity, I actually think he does have a point in how diversity is defined. And I think it is a legitimate criticism of the left or parts of the left that the word diversity is often used to mean quite a narrow spectrum of diversity.
Right.
And there's certainly I think a segment of what I would consider sort of NPR liberalism, which when they say diversity really means...
It really means anyone but white men. That's what it means. Let's just say the quiet part out loud. Diversity means anyone but straight white men. And where has Niall been? We've been saying this for years. So this whole concept of diversity that's used as a hammer to hit over white males' heads, it's just so obvious that it's just that. So for him now in 2025 to just be figuring that out is kind of comical, considering he's a journalist.
A person with of a different race who agrees with me about everything else. Mm-hmm. And I think that isn't diversity. Now, I would be in favor.
There's also never Trump diversity,
right?
Where they add a Republican,
right? Who's
Nicole Wallace,
exactly a fake or former Republican, right. And that happened.
Anna Navarro, pretty much any female that would be on The View. They're not real conservatives. They're not real Republicans. I've said it before. I'll say it again. They need a Candace Owen-esque person, definitely not Candace Owens, but they need like a solid black female conservative, true conservative. Because the thing is, that's the only way to balance out the view. Because you have Whoopi, who's just completely gone with the TDS. You have Anna Navarro, same thing. You have Sunny. Oh my gosh, I don't know what is up with Sunny. She sees race in absolutely everything. And then you have that other, I think, Sarah, and then you have the one that's supposed, Alyssa, whatever, she's supposed to be a Republican, and they shut her down. She doesn't have the backbone or the grit really to go up against them. So even if you kept Whoopi, you had Anna on there and Sunny, and then just had one hardcore Republican that would stand 10 toes down and just battle with them, it would be better television. But you just see the same thing all the time. And then when I forget what the lady's name is, put it in the comments. When you see the one that is supposed to be an independent, I mean, they all vote Democrat. We know this. We absolutely know this, and they've stated it. And there's nothing wrong with voting Democrat. But that show would be way better if they had a solid conservative on it. Because when you look at CNN and Abby Phillips, Scott Jennings holds it down, and it's what makes that show more entertaining.
Happens, quite a lot, and it's people, conservative columnist Jennifer Rubin, who has not espoused any conservative belief for years, as far as I can tell. Right. Now, I mean, particularly when it comes to that, what I would like to see as a broader concept of diversity, I have argued for years that class is understated or underappreciated as an important part of diversity. Working class people, regardless of what liberal or conservative ideology they hold, are vastly underrepresented in the media.
Which not always used to be the case.
Exactly.
It was a working class job.
Yeah, but the thing is that you can't have a working class person really working in the media, because they'll start as working class and then they'll become middle class, then they'll become wealthy. This is why the mainstream media is dying, because the working class people like me are just doing podcasts, right? So you'll never get that working class person on a mainstream show. Plus, there's a lot of elitism. So just like for a regular person who didn't go to some top university and study literature and know how to express and recite sonnets and stuff, they'd be looked down on anyway. So if you notice, most of the journalists are like, former White House people or people that have worked for these various campaigns. Imagine me rocking up one day and saying, yeah, I want a job there. They'd look down on me. So it wouldn't work. It's not needed. It's 2025. We have the internet. Any working class person that wants to start a podcast or just put their voice in the whole mix like me, they can do it. That's why I always say I'm just a guy with a Wi-Fi connection and a camera. I'm just adding my voice. I would never be able to get a job on one of these mainstream shows, and I wouldn't want to be honest, because you would then be censored and you would lose the ability to speak as a working class person.
As Batya Ungar Sargon has written a great book about that.
Yeah, and it used to be much more working class. I think part of the reason that it has ceased to become so is the vast fees that colleges charge. We were just talking about this in yesterday's Rising, where people are $50,000-$60,000 a year tuition fees to have a journalism degree. Neither you nor I know, have an official journalism qualification. We just
it's a very overrated degree.
It really is.
I mean, there are good journalism schools to be clear, but journalism is, I always say this, is more of a craft than it is an area of study. Obviously, you can study anything, but done by very expert people who've contemplated the philosophical implications of the job or the subject. But it is more writing is something you can be instructed in. You get better just by doing it. The skills you get are...
Plus, we have ChatGPT, right? So, I just think that whole era of journalists, and I think the other thing that happened is you have a lot of people that went to all of these top colleges and studied all this stuff, and they just want to have the next big scoop. They want to have the next, Watergate. And that's why they make something out of nothing. That's why they jump on things that aren't a thing, because they want to be able to say, yes, I broke this story. Plus, they're competing against the internet. And so you have people on the internet that are able to react to things really quickly, whereas they have to go through all of these processes and procedures. So, I think it's too late. The ship has already sailed as far as having more diversity. And the whole thing about journalists, like, I've never understood how someone can go on television every day and act as if they're an expert in absolutely everything. So they'll talk as if they're experts in the economy, in medicine, in science. That's why I stick to what I stick to. I just talk about political stuff because I have an interest in it. And I talk about music. I just talk about the things that I'm interested in. But I don't speak and say it as if I'm an expert. I'm just saying it's just my view. You can always put your comments in, and I'll always respond if I can, even to the mean ones.
They're not best taught in a classroom. It's just you shadow a journal. You serve as an intern at a magazine or newspaper or TV studio. You learn how it's done. That's it. That's the education.
Yeah, and it is predominantly learnt by the doing of it rather than the theoretical study of it. And I think that is really important. So I'm in favour of diversity. I'm against the government interfering or appointing bias monitors that they will determine what is bias and what isn't. So I seem to be the Terry Moran of the situation as far as I can tell.
Yeah, because it's not, people's ideologies are more complicated too than just like, oh, a right person, a liberal person. I'm sure left people feel just as underrepresented in mainstream media. That's something Brianna would always talk about, as conservatives do. It's just, like you said, very narrowly permitted range of what constitutes diversity. And then the news opinion distinction is the other elephant in the room, is that it's all, they're not even supposed to be expressing an opinion at all, the straight news reporters, but they all do have their own opinions, which is increasingly just a totally outmoded means of information distribution. We will move to a let your freak flag fly, let me know your opinion.
I think you're right that we will. I think that is actually quite a difficult thing in this particular moment, because there are still the remnants of the idea of a wall of separation between the two, and then increasingly in newer forms of media that distinction isn't there at all. And if you look at certain networks, like for example the main cable, well, CNN less so, but Fox and MSNBC both have this distinction that you're kind of just supposed to understand, that the dayside programming is purportedly less opinion based and more straight news, and the evening is more opinionated, but those lines can get very fuzzy.
I think the thing with Niall, he's one of those people that is in denial, in that it's already happening, but the gatekeepers and the people that are paid huge sums in order to do what they do, they're going to fight against it. Absolutely. But then the true test is when these people get fired, if they're that talented, if they're really great journalists, a lot of them won over $1 million a year, when they get fired from their jobs, are they able to start a successful podcast? You have regular people that have built followings over time with no formal training. Most people start doing it in their part-time. So these are professional journalists with big names, with great connections. They have access to do interviews with people that people would be interested in. So you should actually see that when the Jim Acostas and the Joy Reids and those type of people lose their jobs, they should be able to transfer that notoriety and that fame that they have to an online platform. But it's not happening because nobody really is that interested in them. And quite often it's not that they're that talented, it's just that they had a really big platform and marketing budget behind them. For that case, think about Michelle Obama. Her podcast hasn't done very well, and she's one of the most famous people on the planet. So I just think in a free market, things that people want, things that people value are the things that people will consume. Everything else will get left to the side. And I think that's how you determine what is popular, what people want to see, what people want to hear. So that's my reaction. And speaking of popular and what people want to hear, make sure that you like, make sure that you subscribe, and make sure that you leave a comment. It's a really small channel. I'm doing my best to make, everything better, but your comments help me to be better, even the bad ones. I do my very best to respond. My goal here is just to add my voice, hopefully to be nuanced, to be open and honest. I do my best not to attack people. I may attack their ideas, or there might be something funny about them that I might point out. But for the most part, it's just about having a good faith conversation where I can share my view. You can learn, you can put a comment, I can learn. So if you know someone that I would really trigger, send this video to them. Make sure you like. And as I said, make sure that you subscribe to the channel, that I can keep making these videos.